Boom. And here we are for another episode of Motivation and Money with me, Mark Terrell, and my co host, Fanny Snaith. How are you, Fanny?
Excellent as always, thank you.
Fabulous. Excellent.
And
So,
motivated.
today we are going to be talking about um, how to keep going when everything seems to be falling apart or something like that.
Yeah,
So this was something that you sent me yesterday, I think, as a topic. So I think you probably need to be the one to frame it. I've had some thoughts about it, so I'm going to share those. But do you
yeah,
want to sort of kick us off?
yeah. So I've been obviously I talk to people all the time, starting on the focus of money, and people don't usually come to see me when everything is absolutely, totally, and utterly rosy. It might be them. There are obviously a number of people that come to me who are at a specific place and want to move forward, but there's usually some sort of trouble or issue or problem along the line.
Mm.
And I noticed that a number of people have said to me, "Do you know what? I just give up. I can't be bothered." It's like when everything's going wrong out in the world, and we could be having a world war and this and that, and everyone's shouting at each other for saying things that we shouldn't be saying.
Hmm.
Um, and prices going up and all these. Why should I? I just sort of think about, why don't I just give up? And actually, a couple of them have said, I'm just going to think about today. I'm not going to think about tomorrow. I'm just going to live in the moment, and I'm just going to give up on all these things that I've been worrying about for ages and ages and ages. And it's interesting because um, when it comes to money, it's all about taking baby steps every day to try and build a firm foundation of finances for your future. Say that after a couple of drinks. So we giving up is, yeah, of course we can give up, but it's not really going to solve any of the long term problems. So you find yourself in a situation whereby you're talking to them going, well, don't give up, because we need to start thinking about your retirement and what's going to be happening in the next 10-15 years. And they go, yeah, well, we're probably not even going to be here then anyway, are we? And you also think, okay. So it's trying to sort of bridge that gap to bring them back into reality, to then think about, well, what happens if the world doesn't end
Mm.
in a week or a year or you know
Yeah,
10 years?
I
What
think we've
happens
all been there, haven't we? I've just had a situation where I lost the internet because we have builders in, and that's why I've got these things behind me just to cover up our temporary kitchen that's behind. I'm sure you didn't want to see that. And obviously, I'm not thinking, oh, why do I bother? But sometimes you think, well, we've talked about this. How come you don't quite understand the importance of letting us know when you're going to turn the electric off? I mean, this day and age, when people are working from home, they tend to need the internet and the electric to work. So, for electricians to be here, suddenly turn off without even mentioning, oh, by the way, I'm just going to turn the electric off, and you think, what on earth made you do that? Other people are in the house, and surely you must know that they're doing some work, and you're probably going to use the internet and the electric anyway. Um, but I think we've all been there to the point where we think, well, why are we trying so hard? Other people don't seem to try so hard, and they seem to. It always seems to work out for them somehow. But I think, and this is how I sort of thought about this when you introduced the topic. I thought, well, this is all about our character strengths and using them. And there's a lot of we talk a lot about improving things that we're not good at, but actually what we want to do first of all is actually embrace what we're good at and understand we have natural character strengths that we should make sure that we're using. So that I'm going to share with a video in a second, which I saw a few years ago, and I keep coming back to it because it's only 8 minutes, and I'm going to share a couple of minutes of it just to introduce the topic of character strengths, positive psychology. So it might be a good idea to do that now, then, and then we'll come back to chatting about it. So just bear with me a second.
There are 7 billion, well, actually 7.1 billion humans on the planet. And each one of us has a unique character.
So what determines your character?
you do, and all the people around you. And of course, some genetics too. But there's new science proving that if you focus on certain parts of who you are, you can develop your character and ultimately live a more meaningful, successful, and happy life, no matter what your circumstances. I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to figure out? This whole idea about developing our character really took shape in 2004, when two psychologists suggested that instead of just focusing on all the things that can go wrong with us, it's also important to celebrate all the things that can go right. You see, they looked throughout history to identify core virtues that humans across cultures have agreed lead to a meaningful life. And then they identified 24 character strengths that, when practiced and developed, could lead to these virtues. And they organized them, like scientists have done throughout history to understand things better. These groundbreaking studies showed that every person is a unique combination of these strengths. Like for me, I'm high on curiosity. I could work a little on the prudence. Actually, what is prudence? Anyhow, one of the most interesting parts of all this is they found that if we focus on building upon the strengths we have, it has a lasting effect on our happiness and well-being. So think about it. What are your top 5 strengths?
So there we have. There's a couple of minutes there on. Go on.
So I'm guessing there's a quiz that goes with that, is there?
Well, not directly with this video, but there is a way to check in with your character strength. It's the VIA character strength assessment. I'll share the link after we finished to do that if you want to. I've done it. What I'm going to share now are those. Let's just do that in a minute. 24 character strengths. Can you hear me? Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
they're looking very pretty.
Yeah.
They're nice.
So the interesting thing for me is I'm just going to point out my number one character strength when I did the assessment was this one, forgiveness. And you think, well, that's good, isn't it? I'm a forgiving person, which is, I'm naturally I forgive people. But what happens if I overuse that strength? What would potentially happen? And that was the biggest realization, was actually, if I overuse it, then do I carry on just forgiving everything? Everything's okay. So I've talked about this before, about the mindset of leadership that I talk about with being high challenge, high support. And I can remember when I was running or leading my retail business, I was far too supportive. And I think I linked that back to that trait being I'm more forgiving, too forgiving in some instances, where certain things should have been called out and questioned, and probably I didn't do that quick enough, often enough. So sometimes it's actually embracing, yes, your character strengths, but realizing that there's a downside if you overuse it.
So if we're talking about the topic then, and forgiveness is your top trait, how does that play out if you suddenly feel like you want to give up?
Well, yeah, so that's just one example. So I think what we can do is expand the topic and think about these traits. If we are going to avoid that mindset, falling into the mindset of that negative fixed mindset is, I can't do this. And what we need to do is maintain the growth mindset so that we can carry on. We can do it. We just got to keep persevering, which is one of the perseverance there. One of the character strengths is perseverance. But that video goes on to explain there are 7 key character strengths which make the biggest difference. And I won't spoil it. So I think everyone should go and watch that, and it'll identify those 7 character strengths that actually will help you to be more successful and happier, have a more fulfilling life, and by concentrating on those. 1 or 2 of them are obvious, but I think this is what when you posed this topic, I thought, well, it's actually what we want to do is make sure that we are living up to the person that we want to be. and living by our values and our character strengths are obviously part of that.
Yeah. I get that. I think the thing is though as well though, for people that are already sort of there or heading there, or like a bit of like, I can't see any solutions to where we are. I think it's a really good idea to tap into your personality traits. I think that is a good one. But I think sort of for a moment when you're actually just sort of sitting here and thinking, I was going to swear then, but I won't swear because we're not doing this. Just, and even people starting to feel a bit anxious over it. It's like all this stuff's trying to happen. There has to be techniques in there, because when we're listening to the radio and listening and watching the television, what you notice is there's so much future pacing going on. We call it future pacing. It's like they're saying that when this happens, can you imagine this is how this is going to turn out, and it's all going to be so. Gary, topical in the news this week, which I don't know when you're going to be watching this, but it's the Gary Lineker, who has said some comments about how immigrants, the language that the government have been using around immigrants, and that has basically ended up with him being sacked by the BBC and then reinstated by the BBC, and the government have got involved. And it seems like everybody, the world and his wife, has got involved with this thing. And it's, the story has been like, so he said this stuff, it's gone onto Twitter. They're saying, no, you can't, somebody like this can't say what they're going to say. And then it's all about the connection between the government and the BBC, and how this could be the downfall of the BBC. And then what's the world going to be like without the BBC? And, can we do sport on television without Gary Lineker? And it's all this leading up to disaster. And we've got a new thing this morning about Fiona Bruce having to stand down from her charity for something that she said on Question Time that she didn't phrase in the right way. And I think the pressure sort of comes in, and whilst we're being primed and being told how the world is going to be when this event that hasn't happened yet happens, we actually, if we jump on that train, we end up going in that direction. And it hasn't happened yet. And there are plenty of people who I've said this before and I'll say it again, that when I get asked to write stuff to put in the press, if I write stuff that's positive, it doesn't get printed. When I write stuff that's negative, it does. Yeah. So, and it happens all the time. So the thing is that if you jump on that train, that's the direction that you're going to go, which means that to try and grasp hold of your beautiful, positive character traits that you have is going to be hard. So I would say that for all of us now is jump off the train. Jump off that train and get on the train of things where positive things are happening, because there is amazing positive things. I have a slight issue with positive psychology. In fact, that I think it's wonderful, but I think we also have to recognize that not every day is the best day of our lives, and not every day everything goes well. There is those people that walk around going, "Oh, is everything wonderful all the time? Isn't everything great?"
Yeah, but is that positive psychology? That's just being like overly positive, isn't it? Psychology is about tapping into your strengths and using them in that way. Because you've described, and everything you say here actually makes absolute sense. But you are drawing on your natural character strength from what you are saying. That's how I would suggest, because you're quite you're a positive person. I know that's a fact. But what we're trying to solve is, why do people fall into that mindset of, why do I bother?
Usually it's okay. So let's do this then. So when you've jumped on that train and you're heading down Negative Street, right, where the clouds are generally, it might not be. Let's not call it Negative Street, but you're heading towards the clouds rather than the sunshine. Where energy goes, where focus goes, energy flows, right? So it's very easy to negatively stack things. Well, I'm in this situation. It's really difficult. And how am I going to get out of it? It's all very well you saying this, but how am I going to move on? And I completely get it. It's like when people I don't know, people who have those stories, famous people, or even my story and probably your story, that when something detrimental happens to you as a child or when you're younger, you can either go, well, all these things happen to me, or you can go, oh my goodness, look what's happening. I'm not going there. I'm going this way.
Mm-hmm.
So all I'm saying is that when people are sort of thinking, why shouldn't I just give up? That's why, because there are two trains and you decide which one you're going to jump on.
So would those two trains, one be fixed mindset, one be growth mindset? Would that be too simplistic?
That's an interesting question. I think that might be a little bit unfair, because I think that the fixed mindset doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go backwards, does it? Or sink down. Just because you're a fixed mindset, I think it's more about whether you're I don't know how to answer that question.
So for those that are listening and might not have read it, Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset, and she talks about those two things being those two different types of mindset. One being fixed. In other words, fixed mindset is I'm only good for certain things. There's certain things I will never be able to do. So I'm just the person I am, and nothing will ever change because there's nothing I can do about that. Or you can have the opposite to that, is the growth mindset, where you think I could do anything I want to as long as I just keep trying. I might not be the best person that ever lived to do this thing that I'm trying to do, but I can learn how to do it if I put my mind to it, and if I really want to do it. And I think the biggest test is, do we really want something? That's when we want. So going back into my childhood, I had opportunities to learn to play an instrument. So we had a piano, and I think my godmother paid for me to have some piano lessons. Of course, being that if I couldn't pick it up quick enough, then I give up. That's what you did at that age, wasn't it? But now you think, I wish I was stuck at it, but by now I might be able to play a tune or two. So, and I was probably then thinking, I'm never going to be any good at this, but realizing that actually, if you think about all the people that are fantastic at what they do, it's because they just practice. Yes, there is a little bit of talent, but I believe that most people that are at the top of their game, it's not just down to talent. It's because they are continually to improve, and they've got the mindset that they're continually growing. So so when we go back to what we're talking about here, when you can tip into that, why am I bothering thing, then I think remembering to stay in the growth mindset is one thing you can do, is make sure that you don't get into that pattern of behaviour that thinks that you're only good at certain things.
Yeah, definitely. And a quick shout out here for a chap called, I don't know if you know him, he's called Mark Deeks. Do you know Mark Deeks?
No.
And he does a challenge on playing the piano. And I always wanted to be able to play a tune on the piano. I mean, I started like everybody else doing piano lessons and sort of gave up and all that kind of thing. And I decided, and he does a 15-minute a day challenge sort of thing, where you get 2 songs and you get to play it, and at the end you can play this thing, right? And it's like yay, it's great. And I did that. So those very small things that you can do, so focusing on something very small that you can do every day.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I bother? Sometimes when we look at this thing, well, why do I bother when everything's falling apart? Why do I bother? And it seems like we have to go over a huge hump, right? Whereas actually maybe we don't, and maybe the hump that we have to go over can be literally nibbled away at, rather than having to do, I've got to do all of this to get past this thing. But for those people as well, it's like when we come to this thing about trying to protect ourselves, well, I'm trying to work everything out so that I'm protected against every eventuality.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe working out your finances and thinking about, what's going to happen if I drop down dead? Does everybody know where the will is? Or, what happens if that happens? And you literally trying to create a safe space for everything in your environment, trying to create certainty in a very uncertain world as well. And the simple answer to it is, I think, is you can't. We just have to accept that uncertainty is part of our being.
We can't change the situation, but we can change our attitude towards it, can't we?
Exactly.
And that's really what my point. Really, if I could just flip back to those character strengths, so there's a few I think are quite relevant here. So for one, let's pick one. There's humour there. So we know that if you start laughing at a situation rather than taking it really, really seriously, that can completely change the way you see it. And actually, laughing at ourselves is sometimes the most positive thing we can ever do. Thinking that because we're not taking ourselves too seriously. So that's that's one way of sort of looking at it. Self-control is obviously a key thing here, so that you don't just this is to do with the parts of your brain. You've got the amygdala, isn't it? Which is our sort of primitive brain, which can So it basically makes us do things, fight and flight, and all that sort of stuff. But we've got an actually more powerful part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which actually is far more logical, and that's what we need to engage more than our primitive brain. And once we use that, then we don't jump to those sort of fight and flight sort of things. So that's another way. So self-control is key.
And actually, that was one of my one of the things I wrote down was slowing down your thinking. Rising out of the weeds where you're looking who's coming to attack me. I don't know quite where that came from, but I just say get on the shed and look at the bigger picture, look at the whole garden and see what's going, look at the whole picture. And there's usually you're gonna see some of the positive stuff.
Yeah, and obviously on that note, hope.
Hope.
If you've got lots of hope, I think that's one of my top 5. When you've always got hope that things are going to get better, then that's one to hold on to, isn't it? So it's all these 24 character strengths are obviously some things that we can work on, and we used to be taught this stuff in school, but there came a time when it was seen to be too near to religion, so that's why we don't tend to get taught this stuff in school. So
I really like this, and do you know what? I'm actually going to print these out and put them on my wall, and actually look at them and see if I can practice at least one or two, or notice each one or two every day in my life.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we know the power of gratitude, don't we? If you lose sight of the things that you are grateful for, so the things that are already good in your life, and only for we know that us as a species are far better at noticing things that are wrong than are going well. So gratitude is one of the character strengths that makes you remember, actually, what should I be grateful for? Okay, things aren't perfect and things aren't going quite to plan, but actually, I'm lucky to have these things in my life. And
honestly, I think we take way too much for granted in this. We take way too much for granted generally. And that's, as a money coach, that's one of the huge things, because obviously people come to me in scarcity, with a scarcity mindset, never got enough, never can't do, never move forward. Can't do this, no, rubbish with that, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And so much of it is scarcity. And even the people who are extremely financially successful, who just want more and more and more, that's just scarcity. It's exactly the same as the person that doesn't have it. And actually having the gratitude, silly things, the gratitude for, like, I think it's amazing that every time I turn the light switch on, the electricity comes on, well, most of the time anyway.
Notice when it's not working, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, really, isn't it? So
there we are. So I think, as you say, having these in front of mind is not such a bad thing to do, and making sure that you focus on maybe one or two each day and see how it shows up.
And the chances are, whatever you believe will happen will. And if you do give up, you'll never know whether you were going to get through it anyway, would you? Whereas at least if you keep going, you will get through it, because we do. And so if you do give up, then you're never going to get anywhere, which is It's such a shame. But it's very, I suppose my key thing is, again, and I know I've said this before, we've just got to turn this stuff off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I know a lot of people don't watch the news anymore, and presumably they rely on other sources to get there. And I think you do this really great, because when we were at networking, sometimes you bring up the Good News channel or something that you.
Yeah,
do
positive
you want to
news,
share that?
right? Yeah, always. There's always amazing stuff on Positive News that comes up, and it's like, it's okay. It might not be huge, things that are world impacting. It might be like the number of orangutans have doubled in Borneo or something like that. But all of those things are important. I'm just looking at it now, actually, and there's, what went right this week: a historic pledge for the oceans, plus more. The world's first TV game show for deaf people. Why don't we hear about any of these things?
Yeah.
High-tech soilless and brew with life, the vertical farms of tomorrow. Wow, they look pretty funky. All that
They're
kind
amazing,
of stuff.
aren't they? Vertical farms.
Yeah, really, really amazing. And just all these inspirational things that are going on in the world that, all right, they might not be like somebody dropping a bomb somewhere, or the big news, but the point is that surely we have to ask ourselves, we know that bad news sells, but we know it doesn't do us any good, really, so why don't we start looking at some of the positive stuff to just balance it out a bit?
Absolutely.
Why isn't it policy that for every news bulletin, let's even say 20% of it has to be positive? I wonder how that would change the world.
Exactly. Because there is just as much. There's probably just as there's probably far more positive stuff going on there is negative. But what do we get fed? All the negative things that are going on.
Exactly.
All the world. But it's very interesting. You mentioned it, how people notice and actually click on things that have a negative vibe around them. I saw something, actually. I can't remember if somebody shared something. There's a guy that's got a YouTube channel, and he tested this. He did the thumbnails when you see some like their faces. He did a test, exactly the same video. One was with his happy, smiling face on it, and one with his gloomy face on it. And guess which one got clicked more often than? Yeah, we know. So it's the gloomy one that got. And so now every single one of his YouTube thumbnails are him with a gloomy face. That's his policy now. He doesn't ever smile. And that's sad.
All that clickbait, clickbait. You read it and you read all those headlines. It's like you're never gonna click on one that goes, "Granny gets home from shopping after first day out with agoraphobia" or something. I don't know. Anything that's positive. You're just not going to click on that, are you?
I guess not.
What's the matter with us?
We're far more interested in the negative, sadly. Anyway, and a good book on this is, Our Evolution is Sapiens. I don't know if you've read that.
I've still not read that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And the reason why the way we live today is down to, there's a number of things, but mainly because we found farming. And so that made us into people that, obviously as a species, we now settle because the food is brought to us, as opposed to having to find the food. And that's what we used to do. We used to roam, find food, and stay there until the food had gone, and then we'd find some more food. But when we found the skill to grow food, and then obviously agriculture took off, then that obviously allowed us to stay where we are because the food was brought to us. But anyway, so that's a fascinating book to read. Anyway, our time is up. We need to wrap things up. Fanny, any final thoughts before we go our separate ways?
Just want to smile.
There we are. Happy Fanny's face. That's good.
Like that.
And yes, let's remember that there's always a way out of these things. And if we get into that mindset that everything's going against us, then we need to try and snap out of it. And if that's the case, then maybe checking in with those character strengths and remembering which ones are our strength and using them, and not worry so much about ones that aren't our natural strengths.
I think I would like to say at the end that if somebody watching this is really, really struggling, just reach out for some help.
Definitely,
for somebody. Don't sit there on your own. Reach out to somebody. Pick up the phone to anybody or knock on someone's door or just reach out for some help. There's always going to be somebody there to help you, even if it is the Samaritans, even if it's the Samaritans, who are wonderful people.
Yeah, good to talk. Thanks, Fanny. Really enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.